Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand something powerful today. The world does not reward weakness, and often it mistakes kindness for it. You have been told all your life to be kind, to give, to serve, to help, and that is good. It is right. But if you are not careful, your kindness will become the very thing that causes people to overlook, misuse, and even disrespect you. The reason people take advantage of kindness is not because kindness is wrong, but because human nature is selfish. When you constantly give without boundaries, when you always say yes, when you never demand accountability, people begin to assume that you exist only to serve them. They begin to see you not as a person of value, but as a resource to be used. And when something is seen as common, it is no longer treasured. Your kindness should never be an excuse for others to devalue you. You must set a standard for how you allow yourself to be treated. If you are always available, people will assume your time has no worth. If you never say no, people will believe you have no priorities. If you keep excusing bad behavior, they will think you have no self-respect. It is not the world's job to honor you. It is your job to teach the world how you should be honored. You are not called to be weak, you are called to be strong. Even love has discipline. Even grace has standards. Even mercy has order. True kindness is not the absence of strength. It is the proper use of it. It is knowing when to give and when to withhold, when to serve and when to step back, when to speak and when to remain silent. Kindness is one of the most beautiful and powerful qualities a person can have. It reflects a heart that is compassionate, giving, and selfless. It is the ability to care for others, to extend grace, and to offer help without expecting anything in return. But there is a reality that many people fail to understand. Kindness without boundaries invites exploitation. When kindness is given without wisdom, it becomes an open invitation for others to take advantage of it. People are naturally inclined to take the path of least resistance. If someone realizes that they can benefit from your generosity without consequences, they will continue to do so. This is not because they are necessarily evil, but because human nature is wired for self-preservation and personal gain. When a person continuously gives without setting limits, those around them begin to develop an unspoken expectation that the kindness will always be available. Over time, this generosity is no longer appreciated, it is assumed. The problem is not kindness itself. The problem is the absence of structure around that kindness. When you are always available to help, people will begin to see you as a resource rather than a person. When you always say yes, people will stop asking if you want to do something and will start expecting that you will. If you never express your own needs, people will assume you don't have any. And once something is assumed, it is no longer valued. Think about the way people treat free things versus things they have to pay for. When something is given without cost, people do not handle it with the same care as something they have invested in. The same principle applies to relationships and interactions. When someone knows that your kindness is endless and unconditional, they do not feel the need to honor or appreciate it. Instead, they begin to take it for granted. What was once a favor becomes an obligation. What was once a gift becomes an expectation. Many people find themselves exhausted, frustrated, and even bitter because they have given so much of themselves only to be met with ingratitude. They wonder why people treat them with disregard when all they have ever done is be kind. But the truth is, when kindness is not protected by boundaries, it loses its value in the eyes of those receiving it. The more you give without requiring anything in return, be it respect, appreciation, or reciprocity, the more you train people to see your kindness as ordinary rather than extraordinary. Healthy kindness operates with wisdom. It knows when to say yes and when to say no. It understands that generosity should not come at the cost of self-respect. It recognizes that people must be taught how to treat you. If you allow people to misuse your kindness, they will continue to do so. If you do not set limits, they will continue to take. The responsibility to protect your kindness is yours, not theirs. There is a misconception that being kind means always being available, always giving, always sacrificing. But true kindness is not about neglecting yourself for the sake of others. It is about balancing love for others with love for yourself. It is about giving without losing yourself in the process. It is about serving without becoming a servant. When people see that you are kind but firm, generous but wise, they will not only appreciate your kindness but also respect you for it. People naturally place a higher value on things that are rare, exclusive, or difficult to obtain. Scarcity creates demand, and demand increases worth. This principle is evident in every area of life, whether in economics, relationships, or personal interactions. When something is always available, it loses its sense of uniqueness and becomes ordinary. The same applies to the way people perceive you when you make yourself too accessible. If you are always present, always giving, always saying yes, and always willing to serve without question, people will begin to assume that your presence, time, and kindness have no real value. Human nature tends to overlook what is familiar and routine. This is why people often fail to appreciate what is consistently in front of them. When something is easily obtained, it is often taken for granted. A person who always makes time for others, always agrees to help, and never prioritizes their own needs may believe they are showing love and kindness, but over time, the people receiving that kindness may no longer see it as something special. Instead, they may begin to expect it. What was once appreciated as generosity may start to feel like an entitlement. This is why people chase after what they perceive as difficult to attain. They work harder for things that require effort. They admire and respect people who value themselves enough to establish boundaries. When someone is too available, there's no sense of exclusivity or uniqueness attached to their presence. This is why people will go to great lengths to get the attention of those who do not freely give it away, while they may ignore or neglect those who are always present. Relationships, whether personal or professional, operate on the same principle. The person who constantly prioritizes others over themselves may believe they are strengthening their relationships, but in reality, they may be devaluing themselves in the eyes of others. When someone is always willing to adjust their schedule, drop everything for others, and never say no, their time begins to appear less significant. If something is always accessible, it is not considered special. Consider how people behave in romantic relationships. The person who is too available, too eager, or too willing to please often finds themselves unappreciated. Meanwhile, the person who values themselves, maintains their standards, and does not compromise their self-respect is often seen as more attractive and desirable. This is not because they are better, but because they create a perception of value through their boundaries. This same principle applies to friendships and even workplace dynamics. The employee who is always available to work extra hours without question may be seen as dependable at first, but over time their willingness to sacrifice becomes expected rather than appreciated. Their effort is no longer seen as above and beyond, it becomes the bare minimum. Meanwhile, the employee who knows how to set limits and prioritize their well-being is often respected more because they communicate that their time and energy have value. The solution is not to stop being kind, generous, or available to others. The key is to ensure that your availability does not diminish your perceived value. People need to understand that your time, effort, and presence are privileges, not guarantees. When you set boundaries, you teach people to appreciate you. When you are selective about where you invest your energy, others begin to respect it more. This is not about arrogance or selfishness. It is about understanding that what is easily accessed is easily taken for granted. When a person develops a habit of always saying yes, they unintentionally create an environment where others begin to assume that their time, energy, and resources are unlimited. At first, this willingness to accommodate is seen as kindness, generosity, and dependability. But over time, as people continue to receive without resistance, they stop viewing it as an act of kindness and start treating it as an expectation. What was once a choice becomes an obligation in the eyes of those benefiting from it. People naturally take the path of least resistance. And when someone never says no, they make it easy for others to assume that their priorities do not matter. When a person always agrees to help, even at the cost of their own well-being, others begin to assume that they have nothing more important to do. They rarely stop to consider that the person may be tired, overwhelmed, or even in need of help themselves. Instead, they continue to ask, to take, and to depend on that person without hesitation. The more a person gives without setting limits, the more others assume that their time and energy belong to them. Overcommitment leads to burnout, and burnout leads to resentment. Many people who constantly say yes eventually find themselves exhausted, frustrated, and unfulfilled. They look around and wonder why no one appreciates their effort, why no one acknowledges the sacrifices they make, and why others seem to take their kindness for granted. But the reality is that they have conditioned people to see them as someone who will always comply, always assist, and always prioritize others above themselves. The world does not automatically respect those who give endlessly. It respects those who set a standard for how they want to be treated. When a person never says no, they communicate that they do not value their own time. When they always rearrange their schedule for others, they send the message that their own responsibilities are less important. This is why people will repeatedly ask for favors, continuously expect assistance, and rarely consider the impact it has on the one constantly giving. In personal relationships, always saying yes creates an imbalance. One person ends up carrying the weight of the relationship, while the other becomes accustomed to receiving without reciprocation. The person who never says no may believe they are strengthening the relationship by being reliable, but in reality, they are weakening it by fostering dependency. Healthy relationships require mutual respect, and respect is built when both parties understand and honor each other's boundaries. In the workplace, employees who never say no often find themselves overworked and undervalued. The more they agree to take on extra tasks, the more their workload increases without recognition. Their willingness to accommodate becomes the new normal, and instead of being seen as hardworking, they are seen as the person who will always handle extra responsibility. Meanwhile, those who set limits on their workload are often treated with more respect because they communicate that their time and skills have value. There is a difference between being helpful and being taken advantage of. The ability to say no is not about being selfish, it is about establishing balance. When people understand that your time is valuable, they begin to respect it. When they see that you are willing to help but not at the expense of your own priorities, they appreciate your generosity instead of expecting it. People do not naturally consider the weight of their requests unless they are given a reason to do so. When they encounter someone who never says no, they stop questioning whether their requests are fair, reasonable, or even necessary. True kindness is not the absence of strength, but the proper use of it. Many people mistake kindness for weakness because they do not understand that real kindness requires self-control, wisdom, and courage. Being kind does not mean being passive, nor does it mean allowing others to take advantage of you. It means choosing to do good even when it is difficult, standing firm in your values, and protecting your own well-being while serving others. People who are truly kind are not pushovers. They do not allow themselves to be manipulated or mistreated in the name of being nice. They understand that kindness should not come at the cost of their self-respect. They recognize that strength and kindness must go hand in hand. If a person is kind but lacks strength, they will be taken for granted. If they are strong but lack kindness, they will be feared rather than respected. The key is to balance both. The world does not naturally respect those who do not stand up for themselves. People are drawn to those who are kind yet firm, compassionate yet confident, giving yet discerning. When someone is kind but has no boundaries, they invite others to misuse their generosity. People assume that because they are always willing to give, they do not need anything in return. They assume that because they never demand respect, they do not deserve it. Strength is what gives kindness its power. It allows a person to choose when and how they give rather than being controlled by the expectations of others. It enables them to say no without guilt, to walk away from situations that drain them, and to set standards for how they should be treated. True kindness is intentional. It does not mean saying yes to everything or tolerating mistreatment. It means choosing to give in a way that uplifts both the giver and the receiver. Many people feel unappreciated because they have given too much without requiring accountability. They have allowed their kindness to be exploited because they feared that setting boundaries would make them seem selfish. But selfishness is not the same as self-respect. Selfishness is taking from others without considering their needs. Self-respect is ensuring that kindness is given in a way that does not diminish one's own value. People respect those who respect themselves. They admire those who can be kind yet unwavering, generous yet wise. The most influential and impactful people in history were not those who allowed themselves to be walked over, but those who led with both compassion and strength. They knew when to be gentle and when to be firm. They knew when to give and when to withhold. They understood that being kind does not mean being weak. It means being in control. Many people mistake people-pleasing for kindness, but they are not the same. People-pleasing is rooted in fear, the fear of rejection, disapproval, or conflict. True kindness is rooted in strength, the strength to be kind even when it is not easy, the strength to walk away when necessary, and the strength to maintain self-respect in every interaction. Those who master this balance are not only appreciated for their kindness, but also respected for their strength. Love, grace, and mercy are powerful forces that bring healing, restoration, and peace. They are essential in building meaningful relationships, fostering unity, and creating an environment where people can thrive. However, these virtues are not meant to exist without structure. Without discipline and standards, love becomes enabling. Grace becomes permission for wrongdoing. And mercy turns into an excuse for repeated mistakes. True kindness does not ignore accountability. It does not tolerate disrespect, nor does it allow abuse to continue under the name of forgiveness. When people operate in love, grace, and mercy without discipline, they create an imbalance that leads to resentment and frustration. Many individuals give endlessly, hoping that their kindness will be enough to change others, only to find themselves taken for granted. They continue to show patience to those who repeatedly disrespect them, believing that their forgiveness will inspire transformation. But the reality is that when people are given benefits without consequences, they rarely see the need to change. Love is not just about giving, it is also about guiding. It is not only about being patient, but also about setting boundaries. It requires the wisdom to know when to embrace and when to correct, when to forgive, and when to walk away. Parents who love their children do not allow them to do whatever they want. They establish rules, enforce discipline, and create structure because they understand that love without discipline produces entitlement and irresponsibility. In the same way, relationships that lack accountability breed dysfunction. Grace is meant to empower, not to excuse. When people receive grace, it should inspire them to do better, to grow, and to improve. But when grace is given without standards, it becomes a loophole for continuous mistakes. People begin to assume that no matter what they do, they will always be forgiven, always be welcome, and always be given another chance. They no longer see the privilege in grace because they have never experienced the cost of losing it. Mercy is a beautiful gift, but it must be applied with wisdom. If someone continuously mistreats others and is never held accountable, they will never see a reason to change. If an employer never enforces consequences for an employee who underperforms, that employee will never improve. If a friend repeatedly disrespects another but is always forgiven without addressing the issue, the cycle of mistreatment will continue. Mercy should not be confused with tolerance of toxic behavior. True mercy offers redemption, but it does not eliminate the need for change. People who operate in love, grace, and mercy must also embrace discipline and standards. They must understand that forgiveness does not mean allowing mistreatment to continue. Kindness does not mean accepting disrespect. Patience does not mean enduring toxic relationships. Setting standards is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of self-respect. It teaches others how to treat you and ensures that your kindness is valued rather than exploited. Relationships thrive when there is a balance between compassion and accountability. When love is accompanied by discipline, it fosters growth. When grace is given with standards, it encourages responsibility. When mercy is extended with wisdom, it creates an opportunity for real transformation. True kindness is not about giving endlessly. It is about giving wisely. It is not about being soft. It is about being strong. It is not about pleasing people. It is about upholding values that protect both yourself and those around you. The way people treat you is often a reflection of what you allow. You are constantly teaching others how to interact with you by the way you respond to their behavior, the boundaries you enforce, and the level of respect you demand. Many people struggle with feeling unappreciated, overlooked, or even mistreated, but they fail to realize that they have played a role in shaping how others perceive them. Respect is not freely given, it is cultivated. When a person carries themselves with dignity, sets clear expectations, and refuses to tolerate mistreatment, others naturally adjust their behavior. On the other hand, when someone continuously tolerates disrespect, makes excuses for others, and avoids confrontation, they unknowingly send a message that their feelings, time, and presence do not need to be valued. People observe patterns. If they see that you always agree to things that inconvenience you, they will assume your comfort is not a priority. If they notice that you never defend yourself when you are disrespected, they will believe you do not mind being treated that way. If you consistently put others ahead of yourself, they will assume that their needs are more important than yours. There is a misconception that being liked is the same as being respected. Many people fall into the trap of trying to be agreeable, thinking that if they always say yes, never set boundaries, and always prioritize others, they will be appreciated. But respect is not earned through endless giving. It is earned through self-worth. The most respected people in any environment are not those who allow themselves to be used, but those who are clear about their value and unafraid to enforce it. When someone establishes boundaries, they teach others that their time, energy, and emotions are valuable. When they say no without guilt, they communicate that their priorities matter. When they refuse to accept mistreatment, they show that they have self-respect. People will always test limits, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The way you respond determines whether they continue to push those limits or adjust their behavior. This applies to every area of life: friendships, family, work, and romantic relationships. In friendships, if you're always the one making sacrifices, putting in the effort, and adjusting your schedule while the other person does not, you're showing them that your time is less valuable than theirs. In the workplace, if you constantly take on extra work without recognition, you are signaling that your contributions can be taken for granted. In romantic relationships, if you overlook disrespectful behavior in the name of love, you are teaching your partner that mistreatment has no consequences. The key to earning respect is consistency. A person cannot set boundaries one day and ignore them the next. They cannot demand respect in one situation and tolerate disrespect in another. People respond to what is reinforced. If someone sees that you hold yourself to a high standard, they will rise to meet it. But if they see that your standards are flexible based on fear, guilt, or the desire to be liked, they will continue to take advantage of that inconsistency. Self-respect is not about arrogance or selfishness. It is about recognizing your own worth and requiring others to do the same. It is not about being unkind. It is about ensuring that your kindness is valued. It is not about pushing people away. It is about attracting those who understand and appreciate the respect you demand. When you establish how you deserve to be treated, the people who truly respect you will honor it, and those who do not will remove themselves. True kindness is not about sacrificing yourself to gain approval, nor is it about tolerating disrespect in the name of generosity. It is about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and ensuring that your kindness is valued rather than exploited. People will only respect what you require them to respect. When you make yourself too accessible, when you never say no, when you allow mistreatment without consequences, you unknowingly teach others that your time, energy, and presence are not valuable. But when you establish boundaries, when you stand firm in your self-worth, and when you give from a place of strength rather than fear, you shift the way people see you. The world does not naturally respect those who give endlessly. It respects those who give wisely. Kindness is a gift, but it is only appreciated when given with wisdom, self-respect, and a clear understanding that your presence is a privilege, not an obligation.